On the line is Assistant Commissioner for Crime, Assistant Commissioner Steve Fontana. Good morning.
Good morning, Neil.
Did the police let down the alleged victim here?
Look, well, the police have let everyone down in this particular case. The investigation was inadequate, and that, as you said, justice delayed. It's just not fair for any of the parties involved, to be quite honest.
It was inadequate. Why?
Look, there's probably, I know there were allegations made that pressure was put on the original investigators. That was initially investigated by the API. I don't know whether any substance was found to that. We had the brief come back to us from the API with a recommendation that we review all relevant evidence and make sure it's properly recorded and retained. And when the Sex Crime Squad went through the brief, they found a lot of gaps or things that needed to be done. And as they started to pull it together, they said, look, we actually need to look more closely at this. And they've done that, and they've worked very hard on it. And after consultation with the Office of Public Prosecution, a decision's been made to lay charges.
Was it, well, as was alleged, was somebody trying to make it go away?
Look, that's really hard to say. This was originally being investigated by a local criminal investigation unit. We've moved away from that over the last number of years. We've got specialist investigators trained up throughout the state now, not only at the sexual crime squads, but in all the regions. And, it may be about the capability of the investigators that we were doing this. It was an inadequate investigation, and, whether there was influence or pressure, that's hard to say at this stage, but certainly we've had some concerns when we reviewed the brief.
What, concerns that there had been pressure?
Just in relation to the whole quality of it.
So is there an investigation continuing as to whether, because if pressure was exerted here, regardless of guilt or innocence, that doesn't go to it, if pressure was exerted and charges should have been laid 9 years ago and weren't, then the people responsible for that pressure need to be dealt with. Is that investigation continuing? Look,
we're pulling something together in relation to that, and it's probably a bit, I've got to be very careful about what I say at this stage in relation to that, Neil. There's process to be gone through, but we're pretty concerned when we looked at the quality of the brief of evidence and the matters that weren't followed up or included in the original brief.
So you ask, is it correct to say you're still investigating whether it was incompetence or something more sinister?
Exactly right, yeah.
Mm. Did more evidence come to hand when it was looked at further?
Look, we've actually, I won't go into detail because this is really subject to a legal process now, other than to say we identified gaps and we've followed up and obtained further statements and things like that, Neil.
And the victim, you've obviously spoken to the alleged victim, rather. Is she was willing, as I understand it, willing for it to be reopened and to go ahead?
Yes, but the victim's been consulted. The alleged victim, if we use that terminology, has been consulted throughout the process.
Have you apologised to her for the delay?
I've also met with her, and when we informed her of the process that was starting up again, we did apologise, I think, from memory. This hasn't been well handled across the board. Was Stephen Milne interviewed again? I won't go into that at this stage. I don't really want to comment in relation to the brief or what we've done.
Okay, it's very publicly known, and in fairness I should raise this, that another player, Fontana, was interviewed at the time in 2004. Are there any more charges expected to be laid here?
We're not expecting to lay any other charges, no.
Okay, are you willing to say whether you have interviewed Fontana?
Oh, I can't go into that either.
Okay, have the police involved in this case, whether it was incompetence or something more sinister, are they still on the job?
Some of them are ex-members now, so as I said, we've had to go back and re-interview everyone that was involved in the original investigation, but some of them are no longer in the organisation.
Okay, so would they be subject to action if necessary?
Well, certainly if we're looking at from a disciplinary point of view, anyone that's left, no. But as I said, we've got to, during the course of the re-investigation of this, we've had some concerns, and whether it's incompetence or otherwise, that's yet to be established.
And why was it re-investigated?
Look, the file came back, and the API rightly recommended that we sort of review the file just to make sure that it's all been properly recorded and retained. The brief wasn't in a really good format in terms of when we had it sent down there, in terms of if this is for quality. And as I said, we've got a specialist group of people that are trained in conducting these investigations, and they went through the brief in detail, and they came back with a whole range of gaps and said, look, we should be looking at this more closely, which they did.
You would be aware, I'm sure, of the case involving the Carlton players back in 2005.
Yeah.
Where, in fact, the alleged victim in that case received an apology from the police because it was handled inadequately.
Yeah.
Here we have two cases of allegations, serious allegations against AFL players, and the police have failed in both cases.
Yeah, they have failed in these cases, and as an organisation, that's probably why we've changed our model for investigating offences, sex offences, and child abuse. We've got these, as I said, these units throughout the state now, sex offence and child abuse investigation teams, and they're specialists. They are trained to a higher level than the in terms of the investigation of these offences. Far more better training than what was provided in previous years for investigators at local criminal investigations unit. Not to say that those members weren't trained properly, but you do need specialist skills in this area, and as an organisation, we've recognised that. And for that reason, we've come a long way in terms of the model that we're operating under now.
I understand that, but you can see what it looks like. Two serious cases, AFL players. Is there a possibility of AFL players at times being put above the law, or if not that sinister, of police perhaps being a bit, on the road police, being a bit bedazzled by the fame of an AFL player?
I really couldn't say why this has happened. It's really disappointing though, Neil. As an experienced investigator myself, I'm pretty disappointed when I look at the quality of some of these files, and it really is disheartening.
Well, regardless of what happens in the Milne case, I mean, he either should have been ended 9 years ago or charges 9 years ago, shouldn't it?
Well, that would have been the ideal situation. But look, on the other token, we do have a lot of cold cases. I've got a cold case unit within sex crimes and also within the homicide squad. And, we do go back. These are serious offences, and, technology changes, forensics, and we often revisit cases that are historic.
But you agree this hasn't been fair to the victim, and hasn't been the alleged victim, and hasn't been fair to Milne either, has it?
No, I agree with that. It's one of those matters, and it's going to be a very difficult road ahead in relation to this particular case. We do have a legal process to go through, and I'm sure this will be under a lot of scrutiny in terms of how the investigation's been managed.
Thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thanks, Neil.